Hi, Janae. Thank you for coming back in here today. I know it's been a few weeks since the last time we spoke, so I just wanted to give just a brief reminder about our confidentiality agreement, where everything that you say in here is private and kept between us. Obviously, you know, except for those few instances, like if you mention to me anything about, harm to yourself or others or abuse, and that all still you still that all makes sense. So, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Well, I appreciate you being here. And I just wanted to ask you to get started. I guess what's been going on recently that made you want to come in for a session today.
Um, was kind of a lot of the same stuff. Just really overwhelmed with life and mom and trying to juggle all of the responsibilities and showing up for everybody when I don't feel at my best.
Okay, go on.
I just have been feeling like I'm running on empty and trying to show up for everybody. And, my kids have hit ages. My oldest are, you know, kind of hitting the preteen, and I understand they're kids, but it's often feeling like nothing I do is enough for them. Um, when really I spend all of my time trying to show up for everybody around me, and um, I just feel like it's never quite enough. No matter how much I try and I give and you know,
Thank you for sharing that. What I'm hearing is you're giving a lot to your family. You're sacrificing a lot. You are putting in a lot of time and effort and emotion, but you're not receiving in return that same respect, that same love. You're not receiving the satisfaction. You're not receiving any credit or any gratefulness to what you're putting out. That must that must feel that must feel very discouraging when you're putting forth that effort, but you're not being recognized in return.
starts to wear and you kind of, constant comments of just, frustrated kids that feel that, you know, and I have a lot of support and there's lots of family around to show up and help and but it falls on mom to kind of figure out a lot of those things. Nobody prepares you for all of the mental tasks that mom has to be in charge of.
Right. So, Janae, I want to ask you how is this affecting you? Would you say like on a day-to-day basis?
Um, it's just starting to like I feel that I'm starting to almost numb myself to feeling um that it just gets so overwhelming that I start kind of shutting it all off. It's hard to have the patience with everything going on and the fighting with kids and all the different things, and then I feel like it almost starts to like physically affect where I'm just like I'm exhausted and I almost feel like sick to my stomach because of the stress and the worry and all of that stuff.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm I'm hearing you express how on a daily basis with this going on day to day is you're beginning to feel as if as if it's starting to just be so much that you had mentioned the word numb, that you kind of begin to be numb to it. um and that's hard what you're feeling. um And I feel like you might be feeling a little bit concerned or scared for the future when you begin to feel numb, when these things begin to pile up on onto themselves to the point where you feel like, you know, like that it's too much and that there's no end in sight. Um, so I guess I want to ask you a little bit more on that. What would you say is the hardest? Um, what would you say is the hardest about this scenario that for you emotionally?
Um, I'm someone that likes to have. I'm an introvert by nature. I like to have my own time and my own space. I can become overstimulated and overwhelmed by a lot of chaos and noise quickly. And with 5 kids, there just naturally is a lot of noise and chaos kind of all the time. And so it's hard to find moments for me to be able to reset myself because I can't always just remove myself from a situation where I'm needed as mom, to break up the fights or clean up the messes and all of those things. Um, so it just is, I feel like I'm trying to do this balancing act of uh, recognizing that I need to show up and take care of these situations, but also regulating my nervous system to not feel like I'm in fight or flight all
Mm-hmm.
of the time.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm hearing you saying is that you with your personality as an introvert naturally needing to be able to have that time to recharge your battery, right? And that and that alone is making it difficult when when the chaos of of a family, of with having, especially with young kids, with it being nonstop, and nonstop is, you're saying that you're not, it's hard for you to be able to find that time to be able to recharge, that you're not allowed that time and that space to recharge yourself so that you can show up for everybody else. um and it and so with that, I mean, um it must feel almost suffocating to you when you know that you need this, but you're having to show up every single day, and other members of the family aren't able to recognize that, and so no one's, if you feel like no one's there to step in to help, that it's all on your shoulders, and it's day after day after day. And that's difficult. What you're going through, that's hard. um can you tell me a little bit more about your support system, about like who you have on your side, that is, that you feel comfortable and emotionally safe turning to for this on a daily basis?
Um, I have my mom that's super close,
Mm-hmm.
who's often willing to babysit, and which is awesome, amazing, and I know that I to take that time sometimes to drop the kids off to her, but then there's also the balancing act of not, you know, using that too much or dropping them off too much to her, and um, my spouse a lot of times is um, there, but he's got a lot on his plate, and so it's kind of just another anyway, just another balance to try to find of everything that he's trying to do, as well as you know showing up for all the household stuff and I think I kind of struggle with feeling like my oldest kids are at an age that they could be of more of a help around the home, and
Mm-hmm.
while not trying to like lean on them too much. Another one of those balancing acts. It's just like everything in life is balancing act and trying to find the right balance. But um, anyway, so that there's support, but then it's that guilt comes as mom to try to feel like you're leaning on anybody too much rather than just like it's my responsibility.
Okay. What would you say feels the hardest about that?
um
Take your time.
I guess the hardest is trying to know what I really have to do on my own and what I can let go of and turn over to other people, and to realize that even if it's not done in the certain way that I want it to be done, that I can turn to people more for help and for reaching out and to reach out more. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like you are saying you have this inner battle between how much, I guess you would say, how much you're willing to handle on your own before you hit your boundary where you really need other people to step in. And that's something that you're struggling with. That's hard for you to find, to find that, um, because it feels unfair that you have to have a boundary there. That it feels discouraging and disappointing to you when you have other support. You have, obviously you have a spouse that's, an equal with you, but that that you feel like you have to ask to get that help. And that must feel discouraging for you, disappointing even. So I want to thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate that. And it's definitely something that we can continue working on, and just trying to discover a little bit more on that. And um, so I guess before we finish our session here today, I want to ask you, um, I guess, what would you feel would be the most important thing for me to know before we finish today?
um yes, just that um
Take your time.
um
Or maybe what we can do is I can leave you with that question, something that you can kind of ponder and think about. It's that could be something we can start out with next session to discuss. Of what you feel with all of this going on is the most important thing for you to want to, I guess, discuss, or to pinpoint, and be able to process. So I thank you for coming in today, and I'll look forward to meeting you next time. Okay.
perfect.